Most seven-figure Amazon sellers hit a wall, not because there is no more room to grow, but it's often because they are still stuck in the middle of everything, where everything in their business depends on them. I've worked with over 100 brands, and I can tell you that this is the most common breaking point I see. So in this video, I'm going to show you how we helped a 3 million brand owner get out of the daily operations, delegate, and start scaling again. So let's dive in. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the business. We have nearly $3 million in annual revenue, 2 co-founders with only 1 general VA. They are selling in 8 marketplaces, and their business is a brand selling in multiple categories. Now, one of the major challenges is that their current systems, they did not really match the complexity of their business, right? It started as a chaotic startup, as everyone else, but they grew quite rapidly. And now the current systems, the current way of doing things simply doesn't match the scale of the business. The second problem is that both co-founders are essentially involved in everything, right? Both of them are kind of helping each other, making decisions together. And once again, this may sound nice, but it's not very efficient, right? So that is a big issue we have to solve. A lot of these processes, as I mentioned, are still manual. There's no organizational structure, and they just hired a VA to kind of help them with various tasks. But there's no clear accountability. They also tried hiring for a full-time role in the business, but it didn't work well because they hired late, right? They rushed the decision. It was a reactive decision to hire someone. They made the wrong hire. It didn't work out well because they had no onboarding structure. They didn't have the capacity to train the person properly. Plus, of course, they didn't have the system, so they didn't really know what they want to delegate in the first place, and it failed. So they lost a little bit of confidence in hiring and how to even solve this issue because hiring simply didn't work for them, right? Now, the goals here for this project were to free up the founder's time for strategic work, both of them, right? So one founder should be focused on strategy and leadership and the operations, and the other founder should focus on the vision and new product ideas. In other words, we want to get them out of the weeds. Second, we want to have a business that can run and scale with minimum founders' involvement, right? So they can focus on the growth while the business keeps running. And for this, of course, we want to get back their time, reduce the chaos, and ideally position the business so it can grow from those 3 million to 5 or more, and later potentially even to 8 figures. We want to do this with a lean team, lean team, high output. We don't want to hire 5 more people. They have no interest in managing a big team, so we need to keep that in mind. It should be lean team, laser focused, high output. Now, we need to also break down why this business couldn't scale. What was the major issue, right? Because we have current structure, they are doing 3 million, that's very good, but why they couldn't scale it further? Why did they get stuck in the first place, right? So we need to analyze this and break this down. First of all, no role clarity or any organizational accountability structure. As I mentioned, the co-founders involved pretty much in everything. The VA helping everyone with various tasks, but no one really owned the outcomes. Who makes decisions, who is accountable for which process, we don't know. So the more the business grows, the more chaotic it gets, right? And if you are in the situation where more revenue means more work and more chaos, you simply cannot scale because sooner or later something will break. We also late hiring, no process, right? There was no process for hiring. They just brought someone who they thought was a good fit, but he wasn't. So we need to tackle this as well, hiring. And also we identified that a big time sink for one of the founders is supply chain management. And of course, at this scale, it's more than 40 hours a month, spent on supply tasks alone. And as you know, managing supply is also quite a reactive, a lot of firefighting. So it takes a lot of mental capacity. It's not just about the time. And lastly, no planning rhythm, right? There was no real direction. The goals were vague. And of course, they didn't have much time to focus on growth. So there was no planning in place. Now, if we talk about the fix, there are 6 key areas we tackled in order to fix this, right? First of all, fix the co-founder dynamic and roles. This is essential, right? That was the first step we did because we need to clarify, focus on their strengths and put them in a role where they can bring the most value to the business. Second, we wanted to rebuild the supply chain system because a lot of the tools were outdated, it wasn't centralized. So even if we had someone on the team who could do this, well, it would be too confusing. It would be hard to manage them. It would be hard to explain the accountability. So we need to focus on the tools and the system itself before we even think about bringing someone else on board. Also, setting up a scalable product development pipeline, right? If they want to grow, they have to launch products. That's their most important growth engine in the business. So we want to have a pipeline that allows us to develop multiple products at once and launch them into all of these marketplaces. We also want to redesign the team structure, right? We mentioned we have one VA, two co-founders, so we want to take a closer look at the organizational structure, the accountability for the whole team, what the ideal situation would look like, install a proper hiring system, so if they want to hire, they know how they can effectively bring new people on board. And lastly, build a real strategy rhythm, right? Because once they get out of the weeds, they can start growing again, but they need to know how, right? It needs to become more rigorous. We want to get away from the startup chaos of everyone just winging it. We want to have a proper business structure. And a big part of that is having a real strategy rhythm. And we wanted to do all of this in 3 months. So let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at the transformation, right? If we take a closer look here, we have a lot to cover. So let's get into it. So our goals for this, as I mentioned, founders' time for strategic work, business runs with minimal involvement, lean team, high output. I always start the cooperation when I work with a seller by just asking them to summarize what would happen if they stopped working for a week, what would happen if they stopped working for a month, right? If there are some serious issues that happen during the founder disconnecting for like a week or 2 weeks or a month, that kind of gives us direction what we need to solve, right? Because ideally, you need a business that can run without you for a week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month, because only then you have the capacity to focus on growth, right? So if we ask this simple question and go through this simple thought experiment, we asked, and of course, since she was involved in supply chain management, of course, late shipments, missed payments, delayed POs, 1 month, angry suppliers, stockouts, no product development. This other co-founder neglected PPC, listings, ranking, competition. So as you can see, they were pretty much doing everything, and a lot of these things are maintenance, right? So we want to get them out of the maintenance. Now, throughout this, I'm using our AI, which I trained on all of these projects where I worked with multiple sellers. So you can get access to it. It's a part of our brand systemizer toolkit. I'm using it myself when I work with clients. I use it for my own business. It kind of helps you to build processes, hire people, plan and prioritize. So I use this for everything I'm about to show you. Now, the first step is to fix the co-founder dynamic, right? We want to clearly define for visionary and integrator responsibilities so both co-founders could focus on what they do best, right? Identify their strengths. Because if your accountability chart looks something like this, you have two co-founders, it's very common, and it's great when you're two people involved or multiple people involved in the business. But if it looks something like this, where kind of everyone is involved in everything, you're doing everything together, this may be great at the beginning, right? Because you're helping each other out, getting inspiration, getting motivated, getting the drive out of each other. But at a certain point, and I would say the certain point is once you cross 7 figures, you need to become serious and look at it as a real business. So this is not an optimal structure. I talked about integrator and visionary framework. So what we did, we introduced this framework to these co-founders to understand what the ideal structure looks like, right? We have the integrator who's focused more on the operations, who's focused more on the team, hiring, managing KPIs, short-term plans. And we have the visionary who's focused on the big picture, who's focused on the vision, who's identifying the big moves, the big projects. And the beauty of this is that the integrator is kind of protecting the visionary from the chaos of the business. Because it's easy to become pessimistic and a little bit more risk averse if you face the daily fires and it's like shipments, issues with this account, then it's hard to have your eye on the big picture, on the future, on the big moves, new marketplaces, new brands, new niches, new product lines, new suppliers, right? So the integrator is an equivalent of a COO, right? And the visionary is the equivalent of a CEO, right? So that is the idea to have this dynamic. It's not that one is more important than the other, but we have this so they can both tackle and basically tap into their strengths. What we did, there's multiple personality tests, but the 16 personalities is my favorite, where you answer a few personal questions and help you categorize your personality into one of the 16 personalities. And we did these with these co-founders, and it helped them understand that actually we know who should be the visionary, who should be focused on the product development, the marketing, the branding, and the other one who's more organized, more structured, more bigger systems thinker, right? So once you run 16 personalities tests, it will help you understand which one of these you are. For example, I'm the architect. I like to build systems. I like to be organized. I like processes, workflows, and structure, right? So I would be a perfect candidate to be the integrator. Now, once we did this, we clarified the structure, which of these co-founders should be in the visionary role and which one should be the integrator. And again, it's not that one is more important than the other. It's not that you have 60% in the business, so you should be the visionary because he's more important. Nothing like this, right? We are trying to understand the strengths. So one is focused more on the customer, more on the products, more on the branding, the marketplace expansion and all of that stuff, while the integrator is keeping things running, right? Taming the chaos of the business, managing the team and all of that. Now, we did this. It took, of course, the transformation takes time for people to get used to it, but we need to clarify, the decision framework. So not all decisions need to be made together. So we clarify who is responsible for what, and we start defining the accountability, right? So we clearly define visionary integrator responsibilities and the dynamic of these co-founders. Once we did that, we could move on to building out the systems, right? And of course, the integrator is more in charge of building out the systems for the business. I have these simple frameworks to help you wrap your mind around this, right? Before we start building systems, essentially the systems have three key parts, right? Process maps, the high-level views, task management, and a company wiki. Before we start building specific systems, we need to clarify and set up the actual tools for this, right? The task management and company wiki. That will be the foundation we will slowly populate as we build out our processes. So for our company wiki, I like to use Notion. This is where all of your SOPs and all of your plans live. And for task management, Asana, right? To have something where you can see transparently who is accountable for what is the progress on different projects, different tasks, right? This will become essential once we start delegating. If it's just you don't really need this. You have your to-do list on pen and paper or whatever. But once you bring team on board, you want to have the transparency. You want to see who is doing what, the deadlines, the due dates, keeping track of all of the moving pieces. Super helpful. Now, when it comes to actually systemizing the business, we often talk about systems and then a team, right? This is our framework designing cycle, buying back your time. It's important to understand that once we identify the area of the business we want to systemize, we develop the processes first and then we hire, right? This is also one of the reasons why their first hire actually failed, because they didn't have the systems. They didn't know what they want to delegate in the first place, which is an issue. That's why it failed, because if you don't know what you want to delegate, you can't clarify the qualifications you require from them, and you just bring a random person on board and hope for the best. That's why it failed. That's why they got discouraged, right? So we start with the processes. Now, for developing the process, I always talk about this. I have separate videos on this, clarifying the objective, map out the high-level workflow, streamline it, think about the actual tools we are going to use, the KPIs, and documenting it, right? So let's take a look here. One of the first systems we need to tackle is the supply chain management, right? The inventory and supply chain, because we need a centralized system. Before we hand it over to someone else, we need to make sure that it actually is a system that our business can run on, right? It's not a spreadsheet we developed where we did 100K in revenue. Now the business is doing 3 million. We need to have an adequate system in place. And we also identified that this, one of the founders was spending 10 to 15 hours a week in supply, right? If we take a look at the value of her time and how much time she was spending in this, she was essentially losing $5,000 per month or more just by doing something that someone else should be in charge of, right? So that is a good frame to understand this, 10 to 15 hours per week, not to mention the countless interruptions during, deep work sessions trying to do something productive, and suddenly you receive an email from your supplier and you need to react quickly. So 10 to 15 hours, accounting also for the distractions. This is a big time thing we need to tackle. So supply chain first. Now, first of all, we mapped out the workflows. Of course, you can't see the details here. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but we defined the key processes, right? The inventory management, purchase orders, shipments, restocks from their 3PL, and some monitoring routines to defining this on a high level, what needs to happen. And the beauty of this is that most businesses are very similar, so we can already work with the templates we already have. Now, there are two parts we need to tackle. I mentioned systems, right? The actual tools they need to use in this particular system to get the results they want, right? So the first part is implementing improper inventory management, right? There, of course, software. We decided to build a custom spreadsheet that helps us see everything we need to see, right? Desired order quantity, restocks, and all of that stuff. So building out this spreadsheet and also a tracker. I know that we mentioned here ashtrays, but that's not their product. That's something we use as an example, right? And trackers, tracking POs, tracking shipments, understanding how to get the data from different the different measurements, the different KPIs, like cost per shipping, like lead times, transit times, all of that stuff. So we have some structure in the place that allows us to track what's important. Again, keeping in mind that eventually we want to hand this over. So we want to have the transparency, and these tools allow us to have the transparency and also to train someone to do what we want them to do, right? To get the outcomes that are required. At the same time, building out our task management, putting out task templates, every purchase order, we go through multiple steps. So we can see here beautifully all of our open POs, what needs to be done, who is accountable for what, shipments, restocks, all of that. And of course, also documenting it, recording a few Loom videos, how we actually do this, how we use the tools, right? And once we did this, I can say that we rebuild the supply chain system, right? We have the tools, we have the workflow, we know what needs to happen and when, we have the routines in our task management and all of the task templates, right? This takes some time to build this out, but now we are ready. The second part, when it comes to systems, this is the core maintenance side of the business, but now we also need to focus on the growth, right? Because we want to grow the business. So we talked about setting up a scalable product development pipeline, structured way, to bring from product ideas to launch, right? Having a pipeline where we can systematically turn product ideas into product launches ideally without relying on the founder at every step. So the founder can only focus on the highest leverage point in this process, which of course is the development of the product, right? It's not the listing creation, it's not the ranking, the evaluation of the launch. It's actually developing the product, understanding the customer, the branding, all of that stuff. That is the highest leverage point in our pipeline. So what we did, we designed the pipeline step by step, the workflow, again, not getting into detail here, but we designed the pipeline like this, put that once again into our task management. This is, again, very important because we are tracking multiple products, launching into multiple marketplaces. So we need to see what do we need to do every step of the way in every stage from development, pre-launch, ranking, product evaluation, what needs to happen. Because likely we will be handing over this to someone else. So we need to know, again, establish the transparency and kind of make sure that the process is unified. Then documenting, recording a few Loom videos, how we do things, how we populate listings, how we communicate with our contractors, photographer, graphic designer, copywriter, all of that stuff. Maybe even our techniques for product research. And once we did that, now our main growth engine is ready, structuring the product development pipeline, from getting new ideas to launches, right? Now we have the key maintenance engine, we have the key growth engine, and now I can scroll over here where we talk about the team. Now, our goal was to redesign the team structure, have a organizational chart with clear ownership, future hiring plans, and growth roles. Basically, having this where the founders can step out of the maintenance, focus on what they do best, focus on growth, right? So we need to identify the labor bottlenecks, we need to identify who we need to hire, and we will do that right now. In terms of the labor bottlenecks, the issue with one of the founders, the operations lead, the integrator, spending more than 40 hours a month in supply tasks. There is no way around it. We need someone to take this off her plate. 100%, no way around it. We are losing money, losing time. Because every PO, every shipment, supplier issue went through her. No space for deep work or strategic growth, or even when she actually got time to do something more productive, message from a supplier, message from a freight forwarder, you need to pay, you need to do this. So impossible for her to focus. While the other founder, time spending, PPC tweaks, listings fixes, Amazon, shutting down listings, suspensions, all of that stuff, monitoring rankings, competition. So his zone of genius is creating new products, bringing new products to the market, new product ideas, working with the suppliers, development, samples, branding. He couldn't do any of that. So both founders were stuck in maintenance mode. And now that it kind of answers the questions, why are we stuck? Why can't we grow? Well, because you're not doing anything that can grow the business. It's as simple as that. And really, that's the case for most businesses I work with. Now, if we take a closer look what the role should look like, we have the founder A, visionary, so he can focus on product ideas, branding, and creative direction. Founder B, the integrator, leading strategy, systems, and team operations. And we will likely need two roles. Supply manager, who can own the entire supply chain, from inventory forecasting, seasonality calculations, to working with suppliers, POs, shipments, 3PLs, reordering, shipment, everything end to end. And a brand manager who can handle the Amazon operations, the PPC tweaks, the listings, rankings, competitor monitoring, and account health. That allows the other founder to focus on the first part, high leverage point of our product development pipeline. Now, once we focus on the supply manager, we define the job description based on the process map and all of the instructions we develop, the tools and all of that stuff. We are working with Excel, so we need someone who's very proficient at Excel, has experience with supply chain management for this type of brand, for this type of business. So we did this, and we realized something very, very valuable. And the thing was that the general VA working with them was very good for this particular job. We could promote the general VA to become the supply chain manager. We don't need to hire anyone else. We can give this person more responsibilities. Of course, we need to train them. We need to show them how, but we already developed the system, the instructions, the task templates, so it will be easier to promote them, to train them, right? They don't really have the qualification we required, but they spent 2 years or with the business understanding and working with the founder before, so they kind of understand things, right? Because they helped before. But now we want them to have full ownership. And how do we do this transition? I also see sellers often struggling with this when they are promoting someone, giving them more responsibilities. They think it will come naturally, give them a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it will happen. Well, it won't. What we need to do is to have an onboarding roadmap, as if we just hired someone brand new for this role, to systematically hand over the accountability, to systematically and proactively train them, right? So we need to set up what needs to happen first day, first week, second week, and get the right expectations, right? So we are aligned, we know how all of this works, and we created a plan for the transition, for the promotion of this particular person. Now, with this, we solved the supply chain manager, right? This transition took around 3 weeks in total to transition from the general VA to supply chain manager. With this plan, of course, the tools we developed made it so much easier. And the second part here was the brand manager. Unfortunately, we didn't have anyone on the team, of course, because at this point we ran out of people to do this job, so we needed to hire. And we realized that this business doesn't really have a proper hiring system. So we needed to install a proper hiring system, have a repeatable hiring funnel, because now we want to hire one person, but sooner or later they will want to hire another one and maybe another one, right? As they grow, as they scale. And having a proper hiring system in place is essential because you bring people on board and you will eventually have to do that. So having something where you know you can do this, repeatably attract talent, right? Screening, testing, onboarding. And in this case, we are hiring the product-focused team member, but eventually they can use it again. So it was important not to just find the person, but have a system who can find us talented people. And as you know, if you watch my content, you know that I like to build hiring funnels, define the job role properly, write job ad, questionnaire, skill test, interview, filtering out larger number of candidates. Nowadays, it's pretty standard, but when it comes to actually implementing it in the business, having a proper job board, understand what are the roles we need, what are the roles we want to hire right now, maybe in the future, have a labor expansion plan and all of that stuff. But it all starts with defining a proper job description. What do we need from this person? And again, it starts with the system we build, right? In detail. Going into detail, into accountability, key responsibilities, day-to-day tasks, routines, qualifications, right? All of that stuff. So we did that for this role, understand that, what we are actually looking for, and then sell the job opportunity, post the job ad, attract candidates, do questionnaire to quickly filter them out, have a skill test from a real world task to actually verify whether they have the relevant experience, whether they know what they're doing. And once we did this, a lot of numbers for the summary. It took us around 2 weeks, to define the job description, create the job ad, and create the funnel, around 2 weeks. And then it took us 4 weeks from the moment we found the candidate to onboard them, right? To fully onboard them and have the first evaluation performance review. So we had around 80 applicants. The initial applications and screening question, we narrowed it down to 20. Of course, this is perfect because we can kind of quickly do that with AI to filter out the questionnaire. Then screening task, we send it to around 8 to 10 candidates. Of course, these are the top candidates we filtered out from here. Interviewed 3 and then found a perfect candidate. I was actually quite surprised how effective this is to find people with amazing experience who can really just come in and hit the ground running. And of course, since we did the work, we planned, we did everything correctly, we found a great person, and with these systems we already had in place, this person was already adding value within the first 2-3 weeks, and within a month, 5 weeks, they will fully onboard it. They will fully in charge of the operations, of the marketplace operations, helping with the product development pipeline, and working with one of the founders on new products. So the new founder the co-founder can focus on product development, working with suppliers, developing new products, researching, and this new hire can focus on listing creation, ranking it, evaluating, monitoring competition and all of the marketplace operations. So we built out the hiring funnel, right? We did this. And finally, we needed to clarify the final org chart for this business, right? The accountability. So as I mentioned now, we have the visionary on top, focusing on, the high level, the vision, the high level planning, and products, branding, and all of that stuff. Then we have the integrator, the second co-founder, focusing on managing the team, the strategy, the short-term planning, accounting, and all of these stuff, developing new systems. Then we have the brand product manager, supply chain manager, 4 people working in the business. So we have a new org chart with clear ownership and roles mapped out. Now we are making progress, right? Now we are actually seeing the fruits of our work because now we have these people basically getting our time back, right? So they can focus on something more productive than just maintaining the business in a chaotic way. And last part is strategy. This is where most people really skip this because if they work in chaos, they don't really think about the big picture. They are kind of trying to survive from day to day. But once you get back your time, once you save 20, 30 hours of your week, now imagine that, right? Let's say you work full time, 40, 50 hours a week. Now imagine you have to work only 15 to 20 to keep the business running. How are you going to spend the rest of your time, right? It's easy as an entrepreneur to become busy very quickly. The Parkinson's law, you fill in all of the time you have available. So you suddenly become busy very quickly. That's why we want to introduce proper strategy rhythm and structure, set goals, and how are we actually going to move the business forward, right? Annual goals, quarterly sprints, and structured team reviews. So everyone is always aligned and focused, and we fill in the freed up time with something productive, right? So we sat down defining the ultimate goal for the business. I'm not going to show you exactly what we did with the owner, but here you get the idea, defining what they want to do, maybe sell the business for a specific amount, and mapping out what they need to do year by year. Then do a proper opportunity evaluation, look at the different opportunities for their brand, launching product lines, expanding to new marketplaces, new sales channels, and really narrow it down and become laser focused, because the last thing you want to do is become spread too thin again. So analyzing using the ICE framework, impact, effort, confidence, to really narrow it down what they should be doing and what they should leave on the table, because a lot of these things will be only a distraction. So that's what we did. And once you do that, implement the strategy rhythm framework, right? Having a real yearly strategy workshop, quarterly strategy sessions, monthly reviews, weekly check-ins. Because at this point, we have people on our team working, taking care of things. We need to be aligned. We need to set the direction, right? This is the vision. The visionary is basically looking ahead, the yearly strategy, the quarterly strategy, but then the COO, the integrator, is doing the monthly reviews and working with the team, making sure that they're actually making the incremental progress as necessary, right? So implementing all of this into our Notion, the company wiki, so all of the plans are there. Everyone knows what they should be doing, what are the goals, the numbers, what needs to go in, right? Ideally defining everything based on KPIs, numbers, and lead indicators, right? If you want to launch 10 products, how many product ideas we have to come up with to actually launch this, right? And tracking. I need to, let's say, come up with 10 product ideas every single week in order to have this frequency of product launches, right? Think about it this way, really breaking it down for yourself and the team. Doing proper performance reviews, right? So we incentivize the team to get the results we need them to get, right? Very important to keep the team aligned, because now it's not just you, it's not just them running the business. They need the team. They need to keep them motivated, paying out bonuses, structure, and all of that stuff. And lastly, implementing the maker manager schedule, right? Because as I said, it's very easy to become spread too thin and kind of fill in your time with nonsense. So it's important to keep the maker sessions, the deep work, right? This is what grows your business, the strategic projects. Set it up, time block. It is, it feels simple, but no one's really doing this, right? When you time block, turn off Slack, during your maker sessions, your email, focus on the one thing, that will move the needle. And then in the afternoon, you can do your manager sessions. And so we implemented this schedule, being very rigorous about focusing on the things that move the needle. That's important. So we implemented the annual goals, quarterly sprint planning, and structured team reviews to keep everyone aligned and focused. Now, and we did all of this in 3 months, 90 days. And now the results after 90 days, just to recap, right? What we got out of this, because it was quite a lot of work to do this. But first of all, we redefined the co-founder roles, right? So each co-founder is now focused on their strengths. We rebuilt the supply system and promoted the assistant, right? So one of the co-founders saved more than 40 hours a month for managing PO, shipments, and all of that stuff. We structured the product development pipeline, so now they can launch twice and as many products as before without things breaking. We redesigned the team structure. We installed a repeatable hiring system so they can hire whenever necessary. Right now, they have a business that can scale to 5-6 million with this current structure, but eventually they will want to hire, and they have a system for that. And also having a real strategy behind the business. Because now, just winging it like, hey, let's launch products and see what happens. No, it needs to be very strategic, right? And allocating the resources they have. So real strategy and planning rhythm. So as I mentioned, saving 40 hours of their time. The team is now 4 people. We didn't bloat the operations, right? So it's not like we had to hire 5 people to get things moving. And as I mentioned, the business, and based on what I've seen, I experienced it myself in our own business. We had very similar team structure, actually. The business is set up to scale to 5 million or more, right? It depends how many more products they have to launch and so on, but they can keep this team structure to essentially double the business. And that was the goal, right? Build a scalable business. We build the systems with the scale in mind. We build the team with the scale in mind, not necessarily building stuff for the business we have, but building for the business we want. They are no longer operating reactively. There's more proactive time, the maker sessions. And more importantly, the business can grow without them in the weeds. And this is the most important thing, right? Freedom. There is also a summary from Natalia, right? She also shared in our community her experience, delegating supply Amazon operations, one of the best decisions she made so far, right? She's now allowed her to focus on growth and strategy rather than daily operations. So that's exactly what I was talking about. And I will keep you updated, right? We did an interview with her as well to see what will happen a year from now. But I'm very, very confident that the business will be growing rapidly because there's so much potential. And now they are able to capitalize on that. Now, I recorded a full video where I show you how to build a business operating system. Exactly what I was talking about, step by step, 1 hour long video. It's here on YouTube, right? I will put the link here. You can watch that. I also, if you would like to try the AI we trained on all of these projects, we work with clients, right? All of our frameworks and everything. It is part of the Brand Systemizer Toolkit. So there will be a link in the description. And of course, if you want to work with me one-on-one to do the same thing for your business as well, you will also find the link in the description. So that's it for today, and I will see you next week. Bye.